Okay, I'm Veronica McGregor. I'm a partner at Goodwin Procter. I specialize, okay, how about that? I specialize in fintech.
Not at all. Raising from VCs is not a business model. It's just not a way. You got to find value. You got to build something. There are three really interesting decentralized companies that I think are, I wouldn't go necessarily
consumer protections issues, because it's a big problem in this industry, because people don't know how to manage keys. They don't know how to deal with a wallet. Once you send a transaction, Bitcoin in particular, if you send it, you're not getting it back. On the other side, what we're seeing is with, again, I'll say the word crowdfunding because I feel more comfortable with that, is a lot of people are entrepreneurs and investors are looking at this idea of bringing up new blockchains, and entrepreneurs are just like, well, let's just start it up. Let's just build out a cryptocurrency. Let's just give it to the users. Investors are like, that sounds like network effects. But then there's the big businesses, right? They're freaking out about this. And is there something in, I want to bring up regulation. Are these big enterprises going to go to regulators and say, hey, this is unfair? Or what do you think is going to happen? Is there going to be a happy ground for these projects that kind of come out of nowhere and they're competing with traditional business?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations happening with regulators, and in a way that the regulators are very actually excited about, that they want to be part of this discussion. There's a number of forums and coalitions of mostly large enterprises having those conversations. From the perspective of the big business, they want to make sure there's a level regulatory playing field, right? If you're a massive bank, you're under so much regulation and you feel like, oh, these fintech startups are doing X versus Y and they're not subject to regulation. From the startups perspective, they want to say like, hey, we have innovative products and ideas, but we see all these barriers to entry, and they won't let us into their network, they won't give us a node, et cetera. So they're looking for regulators to level the playing field. And from the regulators' perspective, they want to see this technology be successful, be my guess, right? They want to make sure that that path to adoption is safe, it's fair, it's orderly is a term they like to use, right? So, that there's not major systemic risks, major bumps like that along the way.
So when Bitcoin really started to take hold originally, before we got to the blockchain, before we got to decentralized ledger technology, like when Bitcoin was really taking hold, a big movement was a bit philosophical and it was a bit libertarian. And so there was this kind of sense like, this is my property, this is mine, I'm not working with anybody, the government, don't come touch this. And if you're a startup trying to build in this ecosystem, that's an awful approach to take, because the regulators are your friends. They're going to give you the guidelines of what you can and cannot do, and they don't know as much about the technology as you do. So if you can work with them and help guide it at this stage, I think it's going to be in your best interest come time to compete with the incumbents. And I think that because if you are the thought leader, if you're helping them progress and create an understanding, they'll be able to see when they're kind of the bigger institutions are trying to create a moat around their business models. Additionally, I think partnerships with the big institutions are going to be fundamental to the success of this technology. You're not going to be able to just enter and provide these services en masse. I think that you need people that they're already in contact with, create efficiencies, create solutions that they can be integrated and worked with. So I don't think that you need to run from the regulators, and I don't think you need to run from the incumbents.
But where you could do lending and money movement, you can't take deposits. That's the only thing you couldn't do. But, and so a lot of people are looking at this. The FinTech Charter, that's what we want. We've been looking for some guidance, this 50-state solution thing where we have to deal with all the, state money transmitter regulators or whatever is a big headache. This FinTech Charter, finally. And the problem is, if you're a small startup, or, I guess all startups are small to begin with, it's likely that this is not a good choice for you, just because what the OCC is going to put in into the requirements, documents, and all of this stuff. So that's where those regulations will come in. It'll be in the application of the technology. They won't regulate the technology itself, but the use of the technology. I just got back from with the current administration. I'm not sure how that's going to go. So it was a very interesting. Anyway, that's how I see regulation.
Easy for me to say. I actually agree with pretty much everything that was said. I will say, however, a couple of things. One, governments are very, very good at protecting incumbents. across the board. I think that will happen. That is happening. I think you should expect that. Two, in the U.S. and I believe in the EU, legislative change is very, very hard to achieve. And certainly in the U.S., it's essentially, it's not going to happen, right? So we are looking at the regulatory structures that exist, and I don't expect new ones to be created. I think we will be playing under one of the current regulators, which will somehow expand what they're doing to fit this. But if you think about it,
Example of that is that in the UK, the FCA, the banking regulator there, the Financial Conduct Authority, has a different missions entirely. So you can take a very business protective or consumer protective stance. You can take a sort of entrepreneurial stance. Governments have a hard time with entrepreneurial stuff.